Well, hello, and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast. Join me, Sam Harris, on my journey of curiosity and growth. I have conversations with some of the world's most fascinating humans, from billionaires to Olympians, and most everyone in between, such as suspiciously happy people and even a hitman. Success isn't just for successful people, it is earned, and you can earn it too. I find out how ordinary people become extraordinary to fuel your own growth mindset. Matt Barnett is the CEO of Bonjoro, one of the coolest tools that I've used, and it's just the most powerful way of quickly connecting with new humans. Basically, it allows you to send a personal video via email. So imagine that you subscribe to a company and in your inbox, you get a personal video from the founder thanking you for signing up. It just hits really hard and it's really effective for customer engagement. And this isn't like a paid interview of them trying to advertise the product or something. It's just that they happen to be a super cool app and I love what they do. And I was just really fascinated to hear the story behind their creator. So Matt is a very interesting human who turns out is from the same part of the world as me. He's from Shropshire, a small county in England near Wales. And a fun fact, last week I found a place called Bagginswood 10 miles from my house whilst I was cycling. So yeah, it's kind of very shire-y, like places where hobbits come from. Anyway, the story of how Bonjoro started is very interesting in terms of they built a product to solve their own internal problems, and they found that people were more interested in the product that they built for themselves rather than their actual business. So they had a complete pivot into being a different business to what they were normally doing, and just shows the value of like talking to customers and finding out how you can add value for them. Anyway, Bonjoro is a remote team, and so he has a lot of advice for hiring and managing a team, which is very useful for anyone right now as we all work at a distance. So in summary, Matt is a brilliant human doing some really cool things, and I hope you enjoy the interview. Welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast. How did you go about setting up the business then to be remote? Because I guess when you first started, you were just in Australia with your main team. Like, how did you then sort of plan, like, okay, we're going to hire some people in London, we're going to hire some people in America, that kind of stuff, and then making them effective?
Yeah, we'd hired someone in London to start on the other business, so we just made that hire. And then about 4 months in, I was like, I think this other business we're building is going to be a lot bigger. Do you want to do that instead? And Ollie, who like runs London, he was like, yes, absolutely. And he's kind of like the growth guy. Although the initial business was fine, dealing with large clients, it was very much a sales funnel, whereas now we are like completely inbound, and we're a SaaS company rather than project based. So it's what we wanted to do. Then we hired another couple of people in London. We then got someone in the States for support, and then we got someone in the States for growth. And then we ended up looking at how we could support better 24/7. And we got someone in South Africa. And then now we've started to build a bit of a team in the Philippines. So it's not like we set out and said we want to grow to one of these countries. We either had operational challenges such as support. We said, look, what countries can cover that? What culture works good for that? And then, in terms of the UK and the States hires, we just look for the best people for the role. So we were just looking for someone for growth who was absolutely gun. Most of our hires have come through our networks. Most of our hires we've met, we've known for a while, and we've then brought them on board. Like, it seems to always be that, we get to that stage where I'm having a chat with someone and they're like, so are you going to hire me now? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's, yeah, you might as well come on board. A lot has happened that way. It helps having come from the UK, which is quite cosmopolitan, and then moved to Sydney, Australia, which is very cosmopolitan. So everyone is a recent immigrant here. And if you live in Australia and you work globally, you're going to have, you expose the world anyway. So our culture is not really wedded to a country or to a country's culture. So I think all of us, global is the norm for us. Like, I've already done calls this morning. I'll be doing calls this evening. So going and hiring people in other countries, it's not a big deal for us. It's just like, we're just trying to hire someone. You just find the best person. And, brands are unique. If you want to find someone who fits your brand, the bigger that net is, the more chance you have of finding someone who is like perfect for you.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you go about then making people effective? Because obviously you have to work differently if you're not going to be in the office every day. And like, how do you trust people and know that they're doing the right thing?
I trust, just hire the right people for that. We don't want to be a watchdog. Like, it's not the way that I work. Like, at the end of the day, I expect people to get on board. As long as people deliver results, that's all I care about. And obviously, being a SaaS company, like, we're very, very results driven. So we measure everything. So at the end of the day, it's very obvious if people are being effective, down to like product releases, down to obviously channels that are coming in, things that are working. So my suggestion there is like hire well. We've made some mistakes on hiring and we've still got a load to learn. I think over time you learn to do this better and, hire for culture. So we hire for that culture and at the end of the day, we trust and we're all hard workers. I'd say we're quite a team of guns. So it's obvious if someone's not matching up to that. In terms of process, like it's hard. Like remote working is probably not that hard on the same time zones because with our team here, it's not much of a challenge. Different time zones is tough because especially around things like conflict management. And by conflict, I mean, you have different ideas on what channel you should go for or what you should build next. And if half your team's asleep and you want to debate stuff with them, you've got to wait 12 hours before they can reply. That's tough. We use Slack, but I'm a big fan of pulling things out of Slack. So if you have a challenge or something to discuss, don't start writing paragraphs and paragraphs on Slack. Like have a 2-minute phone call or a 2-minute Zoom call. We're not there yet, but we try to get to the stage where, as you would do in an office, you can flick on Zoom, talk for 2 minutes, and then turn it off again. And this is not a meeting. This is me asking you a question, as I would do in the office, and that's quite a learned behavior and it's quite a habit. So it's a hard one to get to.
Especially like these days, it's hard to even just pick up the phones, and it feels like something you really need to schedule with someone ahead of time. It's not like it's weird to just phone someone. It's like it's such a weird situation we've ended up in. But you're welcome to like email someone and take up their time, but you can't like phone them.
It's because I think everyone's moved towards asynchronous like communication, whereby I can't bother to pick up the phone. I want to listen to the message on my time, or want to read this email on my time when I'm ready. Like that's fine with customers. Like I understand why I've moved that way, but within team, like break that habit.
Yeah, that's really interesting and super useful, especially when you're sort of working by yourself and then nowhere and just tempted to kind of just write like a big amount of things. It's a nice bit of people.
You wake up in the morning here and Slack is like, you got 400 messages. I'm like, what?
Yeah. So you said like the most important thing is to hire well. How do you hire well?
We generally don't really look at CVs. Like I don't really care what university someone's been to. Couldn't care less. I care more about the work experience, and that has obviously an impact, and that's useful. We've generally started to hire people who are used to working remotely. First thing first is we just talk to them. If someone seems like they could be a fit, I'll just get on a call with them and chat to them for half an hour. We tend to obviously put questions in that are more towards our values. So what I'm trying to look for is, are you like absolutely trustworthy, like genuine? That's an absolute thing for us. Are you a gun? Like in whatever it is you do, will you just keep going until you get something? Are you happy to test and fail? Or will you do that quickly? Will you spend a month planning something, or will you spend half an hour and go and do it, scrappily and see if that works? And if it does work, go further. And we have other things like family and friends are kind of important to us all. Like we all get on well as a team, like we're all quite close. Is that something that's going to work for you, or are you just looking for a job? So it's quite easy for me to see if someone's got the right ethics and kind of morals and values as we have. Then we'll start to probably do a more technical piece after that. I don't think we're that good at interviewing even now. It's hard to do well. I know people who are great at interviewing, and I look at us and like we've got a long way to go, but we're a lot better than we were. It's a learned skill, but culture first and skills later.
Yeah, exactly. Nicholas Taleb sort of mentions that like a degree is basically just virtue signaling. It's not actually what you do. It's just the fact that you can work hard for like 3 years or something isn't really actually like there's no like the skills you actually learn there aren't necessarily related to what you're ever going to do in life anyway. It's just sort of about your capacity to learn is what you're showing, which is sort of pointless if you can just show that in a different way, such as getting some experience, doing something useful.
Yeah, and most of us don't work at the degrees that we did. I think my head of marketing was in philosophy.
That's a great degree. I'm actually quite jealous of people who did philosophy. I'm like getting really into it these days. Interesting. Okay. So what's an example of how you guys have failed?
Well, it took us 3 businesses to get the one that we're running. Personally, I did the whole raise money, start a company, lose all the money, shut the company down pretty quickly. Like day to day funnel testing, product testing. Just yesterday, we were just looking at some stats where we changed our sign up page to what we thought, because we have a certain bounce rate, and we thought we did new design. We're like, this is much better. Turns out we increased the bounce rate by like 25%. And I'm like, well, that didn't work. Let's roll that back and let's try again. And that's just one of the small tests that we do on like a regular basis. Pricing, we test quite a lot. One of the things to be aware of is if you're testing, is understanding the timeline that you need these tests to run for before you can make a call whether they're a success or not. And being able to filter out, I guess, noise within that funnel that may impact what that result is. I mean, right now it's actually quite hard. Like if you look at the whole, obviously the corona impact, the thing is now you've got to work out, the tests you were doing at that time, how much of those results are because of that impact versus how much of those results are because of the tests that you were doing, which is like a huge muddying in the waters. Yeah, but you can start to strip it out. We fail on like a regular basis, but that's just part of what we do.
Cool. So do you ever get interested in people that have done science degrees? Because it is very scientific when you go into marketing in that sort of sense of like creating a series of hypotheses and actually sort of testing them fairly in like the quickest, most efficient manner kind of thing.
Science, maths, like design, so it's kind of half engineering, half art. But but then like we'll hire people who are like we have some creatives on the team, like creatives are rare as well. So like I really like having creatives. You need to have a mix of degrees and personalities because they need to have everyone together to come up with the best ideas. We had the one thing I love, which we don't have right now, is a full-time data analyst. So we track our funnel and we track our experiments and we're getting better and better. But every time you fix one stone, you lift up and there's 3 more things under it to now measure. We had an intern who was like super smart guy. It's the best intern I've ever had because although he was junior, he could deliver value on day one that none of us could do. Whereas it just needs a lot of interns. The challenge is obviously you need to spend a lot of time educating them and teaching them and kind of helping them. This guy came in and was like helping us on day one. I was like, this is awesome that somebody, in year 2 can deliver a lot of value. So 100%. But I think, again, it's plugging holes that we don't have. Yeah, the same would be for a creative. If you don't have any creatives on your team, you get, a second year drama student, and I trust you, they would bring you like so much value because they would be filling gaps that exist in your teams that are pretty major.
Cool. Thanks. So I guess you tried a few different businesses that sort of failed. Do you think now that you have learned a bit more about business and stuff, you would have failed those first 2 businesses faster from like the rate of which they were getting traction, or do you think you would have probably done the same kind of thing?
I'm quite an open person, so I do listen to advice, but I think you need to be burnt, personally. If you want to learn, like getting burnt is the best way to learn. And really, if you get burnt once, you probably shouldn't be burnt again for the same thing. Am I the fastest learner in the world? Probably not. I need to make mistakes to get them. And, there's a huge learning process. You look at like the amount of information I have now. There's very few businesses that are overnight successes. I think like the average age of a sold startup, the average age of the founder is like 43 to 47. And the reason is because they've probably been through the churn a few times. So like you can give all the advice you want. I think most people have to go out and make mistakes themselves. And then they're like, oh yeah, that's that thing that guy said 10 years ago. And the world's changing. Yeah. Like again, like the advice I could have given then, the world today, 10 years on to 10 years ago is not the same world. And the way that we do things, there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of changes too. So, relevancy does change over time.
Yeah, I definitely think that learning things yourself is so much more effective. But I do find the older you get, like the more you learn who is right about when they're telling you things, and you start to take what people say more seriously and kind of be like, actually, yeah, this will happen, what he's just said. So sometimes I feel like I'm getting slightly better at learning things ahead, which is
definitely don't get as excited with people will come, what's the amazing thing? And in the back of the day, like, this is awesome, we have to do this, we're gonna have a full partnership. And now I'm like, yeah, maybe that'll happen.
Yeah.
It's a bit, I feel a bit jaded, which is a bit of a shame. I think removing naivety is again part of it.
Okay. So how did you go about raising money? You said you did that.
Yeah, so we raised money here in Australia. Harder to raise here than in the States. You'll have a lot of low valuations. You won't raise as much. So here it's a different environment to the West Coast of the US. I think the UK will be ahead of here as well, but that's just because we're behind. It's a smaller country. But at the same point, the rules are the rules. Like raising comes down to find the right fund for you. We brought in 2 funds, both with quite different attitudes and personalities and experience. So one is very much on the business side, SaaS B2B, which is what we are. The other one is very much product side. And so one of my guys there was like ex-head of one of the products for Atlassian. So we have this kind of product attitude, and then we have, one of the guys is like invested in the most successful B2B companies in Australia. So he's very much like financial business operations side. So we have products, we have operations, which is great because then our board has a mix of that. So I think if you can find investors, will probably be at your board table. They might not have a board seat, but you should probably get them in there anyway, because if they invest, and this is more funds rather than angels. If you're running a board, which I advise anyone to do, because it's a great piece for accountability and challenging problems together. Think about who you'd like to have sitting on that table with you, and those are people you go and raise from. Obviously, you need to match what you do to what they do. So we're B2B software, so obviously we're going to go and find funds that are more experienced in B2B software. Yeah, but look, pitch early. Like if you start the company, go and talk to people today, and say, this is what we're going to do. And then come back in 6 months and be like, check it out. We did X, Y, Z. That's the number one way to raise. Have a coffee and ask for advice. Like at the beginning, try and meet all the investors, but be doing it for advice and be doing it to say hi and to kind of open up the doors. And then come back in six months' time and crush what you said you were going to do. And then they'll say to you, hey, by the way, should we invest in you? So prove it. Also consider not raising. So counter to that, there's some amazing companies, Basecamp, ConvertKit. The guys at Design Pickle didn't raise a single dollar, and they've probably grown faster than the 99.9% of fundraised companies in the States. So I think this has always happened, by the way. Like it's no more prevalent now, but you're just seeing the stories more. Companies that don't raise have to have a good product, and they have to have a good offering, and they have to have a good funnel, because you have to get to revenue. And so sometimes if those companies get through, they end up being dynamite companies because there's no room for any lacks. Like everything has to work perfectly. So you don't have to raise, you can still do it without it.
Are you saying this because you maybe regret raising a little bit?
So I think we had to. You raise for different reasons, different stages, yeah? Like when you first start, you're basically funding your product market fit kind of like journey. So try and get to product market fit, you raise to hire a couple of team members to get there. And then when you then go and raise a Series A, you're raising very specifically for growth. So you're saying, look, we know our funnel. If we put $10 million in here, it will spit out $30 million here, which is a different type of raise again. Those unfounded companies still had funds to get them going. So it might be the founder was, had already spent 10 years in another industry. And so, could chuck in 100K. So it's not, they didn't start without funds, but it's again, started quite lean. It depends on your circumstances. MailChimp had an agency that funded them building MailChimp. I think Campaign Monitor, which is the other big one, they're out of Australia. They were the same things. They had an agency and they ended up building an email software that did the same thing. That became the company. So other founders might have other companies that are able to fund this, and then it takes off. So there's different options. All I'm saying is, don't think that fundraising is your only option. Don't think you have to fundraise to grow a business, because it's just not true.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you can also do things like use a Kickstarter to prove your product market fit. If that idea is actually worth it, and maybe you get enough money anyway.
Or crowdsourcing. There's crowdsourcing platforms, which is fundraising, but it's again a different way of doing it.
Definitely a big fan of that crowdfunding. If you got like a B2C company. Interesting. Okay, so what about like life? Because it sounds like you're super busy. Are you planning to kind of become less busy, or are you just sort of fully on board with just like working all the time?
No, because I'll be bored. Here's the thing, decide why you're doing things in life. Like I do stuff because I enjoy it. I don't do stuff because money obviously will be there, and successful is great. It's not the thing that personally drives me. Like I enjoy the journey. It's about the journey, not the destination. So the chance of you being successful at something that you don't enjoy, if you look at the stats, are very low. If you enjoy something, the chance of you being successful are much, much higher. Like if you like Alan Watts, like going back to philosophy, like has a great saying, he says, if students ask him what they should do in life, and he says, well, if money wasn't an option, what's the one thing you would love to do? And they tell him, and he's like, well, that's the thing you should go and do, because your chances of success are much higher and you'll be a lot happier at the end of the day. In terms of being busy, I think you'll be hard pushed to find a founder who is not always busy. And you look at the older successful people, and the whole, if you don't use it, you lose it. I mean, Trump, can't say I'm a fan, but to be that old and to be running a country is kind of insane, and you look at Bernie Sanders, similar, like Hillary Clinton, like you look at other, like Bill Gates, the energy he has, David Attenborough, like these are people where most people their age are just sitting on their lawn drinking wine and kind of fading away. But because their minds are active, because they're busy, they're smarter for it. And if you love what you do, why would you stop?
For sure. Just checking that you love what you do, I guess.
Eventually, like I'll probably go and start a foundation. Like there's other ways to make an impact in the world. I like to think of a business as stepping stones. Like you're building a war chest so that in the future, you can go and make change and give back in other ways. People obviously like Gates has done an amazing job of this. But a lot of other founders you'll see turn very philanthropic when they're older, and they use that knowledge and that experience to go and make a much bigger change than they could do when they were 30 years old.
Yeah, 100%. Kind of my life plan. We'll see how it goes. It's nice to see what ways you can do like in the process to help, because you could just never quite become like hugely successful, at which point you kind of never have quite done anything for the world.
If you start today doing something small, it's a lot better. And the other thing is, if you start today, you build up knowledge and learning such that if you do get to the stage where you do have the war chest that you can go ahead with, you understand much better how to apply that. So you're not starting from scratch again.
Yeah, cool. Oh, transitions nicely into, I kind of like to ask people where they see both their life in 5 years' time and also like the industry that they're in. So in terms of sales conversions and SaaS business, where do you see the kind of market that you're doing going? Do you think everyone's going to be using Bonjoro or a tool like that and kind of become like super commonplace, or?
We're not for everyone. I don't think any company's for everyone. Even Salesforce has a small percentage of the market, even though they're massive. Look, personalization, I think within customer funnels, I think personalization is going to become more and more key. And companies that are doing a good job and caring about customers will start to come to the forefront. And so I look at us, we're a video tool. To most people internally, we're not a video tool. We're just a tool that allows people to build relationships with customers. It happens that video is a very good way of doing that because you can't really fake it and it's very transparent. But if there's other tools that satisfy that same ethos, we'll go that way. Like the kind of ethos that we live by is automate processes but never relationships. And so we're basically building to that ideal, and everything we do is around that. So I think that will continue. I don't think that will stop. I think it'll become more so. 5 years time, I would think we'll still be doing that. We're ideally build towards a platform, build towards other systems and other tools that fulfill that same ideal, which can't just be video. But I think 5 years, it's a short horizon. Yeah. I think if you're going to start a business, honestly, like 10 years minimum, probably. The whole idea of, build and sell in 3 years time is a fallacy. It happens, of course. It doesn't happen to most of us. And so again, back to the point we were saying earlier, enjoying what you do. Build because you love it. If that comes, that's great. I mean, look, I think a really good example here is Wistia. So Wistia kind of video hosting, most people have probably heard of them, like extremely successful. They raised, I think maybe, I want to say it was maybe 18 months, 2 years ago, they raised 70 million US in debt to pay off all their early investors. So they decided that they were actually not going to sell the company. And so having had investors, there's no exit point for those investors. So they raised 70 million in debt and paid out all their investors. And they were like, you know what? We're taking the whole company private again, like back into our own funds. So the founders now own the company again. They paid everyone out and they've started doing profit sharing for the whole team as well. So they've gone the other way and said, actually, you know what? We love this. This is amazing. We want to keep doing it. Let's just keep building a business. Forget the mythical exit point. We're going to start buying businesses, build a business, and then, the options are open to you.
Cool. Okay. So what do you want to do with, you mentioned that, when you've got a war chest and you can do philanthropic things and start a foundation, what would be your goal if you to do that? If you had that right now, what would you be doing? Because I guess like in 10 years time, your ideas might be different, but.
One of the things I'll do, I won't say, because I'll probably do a few things, actually called Ugly Creatures, and fund research into essentially organisms that don't get the cuddly and cute attention that pandas and elephants do, but are probably more impactful for our ecosystem. So insects, a big part of this. Amphibians are screwed, to put it light. Again, I get the whole panda, tiger, elephant. As a group of animals, amphibians are doing so much worse than mammals will probably ever do. Yeah, so like I said, insects are having issues. So you call it Ugly Creatures. I think there's a brand here to be built around celebrating that. And so I think it probably hasn't been approached well enough as a brand point of view. And if you can do that, you can build a brand around it, you can be much more effective with it. So I think bringing those lessons for business into that area, I think rather than building just a foundation that raises money, I think the way to do it is do it as a for-profit organization. So I think potentially one of the ways to do this is to potentially fund PhD research into things like biomechanical research and biometrics, where you're having researchers use these ugly creatures and research them to then go and influence engineering and influence potentially medicine, etc. And then potentially even funding companies that make the most of that and then using those companies to drive profits back into the foundation itself. I think for profit is far more sustainable to do.
Yeah, definitely. I guess it's sort of trying to do that in a way that can still have the right incentives at its core. So you're not just sort of focusing on like the easy wins and stuff, and you can kind of fund things that don't always necessarily turn a profit, but are still like useful to know about.
Yeah. So I mean, like if you imagine that, 3% of your investments make a profit, but those are big enough.
Yeah.
97%. Yeah. So you're not only funding things profit, but you need to fund. But there's pre-existing models. Look at social investing, venture capital, and philanthropic funds and venture capital funds. They tend to do this where they will, like any venture capital, a small percentage of the portfolio will become successful and support the rest. But obviously in social investing, you plan for that and you're fine with that. So you know that some of the investments will support some of the other investments.
What's one of your earliest memories that's quite distinct?
My actual earliest memory was being in a cot and my mother came in to pick me up, and then she picked up this other weird baby next to me and walked off with her. And I remember crying, and it was the moment that my sister was obviously put into a cot with me. And so suddenly I was no longer the center of attention. And obviously it's traumatic, that's why I remember it, but I then made it my life's work to be the center of attention. Probably explains why I am who I am.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's funny what sort of affects you. But maybe it's because of who you were that it affected you, and it wouldn't have affected you if you didn't care so much about these things.
Maybe I've got very much got I've got second child syndrome, like middle child syndrome, where you get the least love and therefore you have to be the loudest to get the attention.
I mean, I know some second children who are like the opposite, as in like they're the quietest because they're just like, oh, sort of happy not getting any attention at all. And anyway, my other question is, what is one of the kindest things someone has done for you?
My wife married me. That's pretty kind. So being able to marry me and put up with me is pretty amazing, I'd say.
That's cool. Well, nice. Go her.
She's a hero.
All right, cool. So yeah, those were like my main finishing questions. But if there was something you did want to add, like your top tip for life that you've learned, and like best piece of advice from a mentor is always nice.
One is nasty, so don't stop. I think the people who make it in business or in many things, the ones who just keep going again and again and again. So like failure is fine. No one cares about failure. Like the only person that cares is probably you and your mum. If you fail, just do it again and do it again. And one day you turn around and people are like, oh, you're like, wow, overnight success. Like one of our early angel investors, like his overnight success, it took him like 20 years to sell his business. And he sold it like pretty substantially. But he's like, I'm not overnight at all. He was like, the first 10 years, it was like 5 of us. Yeah. And then obviously we went out and then we got going. Yeah. So like, absolutely, you just have to keep going, like get over it. Like if you fail, like no one cares. Just go again. Secondly, get advice. Yeah. I have got so much advice off people. I think especially if you're a student and you're starting to think about stuff, it's a golden ticket. If you can write to anyone and say, hey, I'm a student, I'd love to have a coffee to learn from you. When I moved to Australia, I did an MBA mostly to get a visa, so I could start a business over here. At the time, like it was the global financial crisis, so I was like, you know what, I'll do this. It's a good time to go. But because I was a student, I ended up having like coffee chats with like the CEO of we got the CEO of like Virgin to come in, like the CEO of Boeing, like the CEO of like Ogilvy in Australia, and I just email them and be like, I'm a student, can I catch up and ask for advice? And they would be like, yeah, sure. And this is crazy. Like huge CEOs would be like, yeah, I don't often get asked for this. Yeah, do it. So I think a lot of people don't ask for advice and they think, oh no, someone's too big. They won't get back to me. You would be shocked at how many people will help you. You'd be very, very surprised. No one's got to where we are without help. Like Sam, you've had loads of help getting where you are. Like I've had loads of help. Yeah. Like we've, and you pass it on.
Yeah. And you kind of get help yourself by passing it on, as in often the person you're giving the advice to doesn't listen that much, but you kind of listen to yourself being like, this is always a bad mistake to make. You realize because of as you saying it, like, I keep on making that mistake. I have to stop doing this.
The best way to learn is to teach. Like it's not, like if you look at the 7 ways of learning, number 1 is to teach. So yeah, go figure.
Yeah, I was thinking about like politics actually, like a bit of a random tangent, but like I was thinking sort of if I was a politician, it would be quite good exercise to kind of make yourself explain what is behind each of the decisions that you make, but kind of like, okay, well, this is how the oil industry works, and like this is why the taxes are like this, and sort of actually understanding it yourself and being able to actually tell people, like have a podcast of like, well, this is what we're actually looking at, and sort of it's gonna be quite interesting for people because like no one does that, and it would actually make you educated about what you're doing.
Also means you have to be transparent though, so and honest,
which is sort of helpful. Anyway, bit of a random one. But yeah, useful advice. You certainly seem to be good at taking action, I've concluded.
Just the worst thing you can do is not make a decision. Making a bad decision is absolutely fine. Yeah, like not making a decision is the worst. So go make a decision, do the things. If it fails, who cares? Just start again. It doesn't matter, and you learn more. So yeah, get shit done.
On that note, I think we're done. Thanks a lot.
All right, Sam. Yeah, cool to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Do you experience stress or have anxiety, or maybe chronic pain, or have trouble sleeping at least once a week? Well, you're not alone. Many of us do. Personally, I do go through phases of not sleeping very well and suffer from chronic pain from where I shattered my femur. So I was searching for anything that would help and discovered Feels. What is Feels? It's a premium CBD delivered directly to your door. And what does it do? It naturally helps reduce stress, anxiety, pain, and sleeplessness. So now I kind of sleep a bit better. It's really easy to take. You place a few drops of Feels under your tongue and you feel different within minutes. The thing to remember that it can take a while to find the right dose, and everyone's dose is different, so you should leave some room to experiment over the course of a week. But what's really great is that they have a human support hotline, so you can talk to a real human about your experience and have some guidance. And remember, it's quite natural, so it'll help you feel better without any high or hangover or addictions. They also have a nice membership option, which lets you join a community and get Feels delivered to your doorstep every month, and you can save money on every order and pause your subscription. In summary, Feels has me feeling my best every day, and it can help you too. So you can become a member by going to feels.com/growth, and you'll get 50% off your first order with free shipping. That's FEALS, feels.com/growth to become a member and get 50% off automatically from your first order with free shipping. Feels.com/growth. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. My goal for this podcast is to help make people happier and wiser, and I'm also working on a few other projects in the podcasting space to achieve the same thing. I run the Wiser Than Yesterday podcast with a friend, where we read and discuss a great non-fiction book a week. Talk about things like philosophy, psychology, the economy, self-improvement, and business. Books such as The Black Swan, Anti-Fragile, Invisible Women, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a great resource. I also run the Curious Comforts podcast, finding out what's going on in the world and how to improve it with industry insiders. We've been focusing on the effects of the coronavirus lately, but I also discuss broader things like climate change and AI. Most recently, I've been building an app, Syncify. It's really to level up your podcast experience. You can connect with your friends in the app and listen to the same things. So you can listen live in real time with each other, or create shared playlists and catch up at your own pace. You learn so much more by discussing ideas with friends. It's really silly to listen alone. You can also discover and share brilliant episodes with ease without having to try and recommend podcasts in different apps and just it all getting lost and confused. So it's also good for combating isolation and mental health. I personally find social media quite antisocial, and I just don't find it easy to reach out to friends to chat for no real reason. But I do love doing things with other people, and listening to the same content means that I can naturally talk about the same things, and it just gives me that friend time without going out of my way. So I really hope that it can help you, and I just would love you to try out the beta version and help us build this. And obviously do invite your friends. It's all about friends. So you can find out more about Syncify app by going to syncifyapp.com. Thanks for listening. Congratulations on listening to a whole episode of the Growth Mindset podcast. Before you race into another podcast, try pausing. Ask yourself, what have you learned? What could you change? How will you make that change happen? Did you press pause? Knowledge is useless without action. What did you learn? What should you change? And how will you make that change happen? You can tell us what you learned by contacting us through the website, growthmindsetpodcast.com, and feel free to connect with us or our guests, or just peruse the show notes. Our Instagram is @growthmindsetpodcast, or follow me @SamJamSnaps for a daily reminder to stop using Instagram. If you enjoy random acts of kindness and want to support the show, you can support us on Patreon or leave us a review on iTunes, and you'll make me very happy. And with that, keep learning and keep growing.